Well, today's an exciting day. As we journey through this fall, we've been on the red letter road. And for those of you who go, what do you mean by the red letter road? Well, the red letter road that we've been on is this whole ministry year, we're going to be looking at the words of Jesus. It's so fundamental in a way, but we say a Christian is a follower of Christ. Well, it's kind of probably good to know what Jesus says to help us understand what faith in God is all about. So every week we're looking at that, and this month of November, we've been looking at what Jesus says about our insides, and we've called it Soul Sludge, if you've been given an outline. And we're looking at those things where Jesus talks about those things that, let's face it, kind of get into the muck of our heart and our mind and our soul, our insides, and kind of sludge us all up. So far we've looked at worry and we've looked at anger. And today we want to end our Soul Sludge series of what Jesus has to say about those sort of things. We want to talk today about pride. We want to talk about pride. Well, today, rather than me bringing that message on pride, we have been, one of our commitments this year was we want to be cultivating some new voices in speaking and preaching. And today we are inviting Julianna Hisey, who is a student at Crandall University. And Julianna, you're doing a double degree, right? You're doing a Bachelor of Theology and a
Bachelor of Arts.
Arts in?
Sociology.
Just Bachelor that one. Don't worry about that. I want to introduce you, Julianna Hisey. She's a fourth-year senior at Crandall University. As you already heard, her fields of study that she's in. I know that she's sorting out God's call in her life and what direction she's going to be serving. But we wanted to give her an opportunity to be able to walk into a local church and have the experience of speaking to multi-generations of people and bring forth the Word of God. No small feat. So without any further ado, can we just give an encouraging hand to Julianna as she comes and speaks on the sludge of pride?
Well, good morning. Before I start, I just want to thank you guys for giving me this opportunity, especially to Dave and Brent, who have been working with myself, and Alex and Layton, who are at the other two campuses. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to preach here. And I know I've talked to some other people who had their first opportunities to preach at the Journey Church, and they've all really appreciated that. So thank you. When I was beginning to look at this sermon, I wanted to share a story about pride and how pride has kind of come back and bit me in the butt when I was a little too prideful. But as I started to reflect on it, what I realized is that the way I struggle with pride personally is that it's more of a false humility. So I come off as very humble, or I try to make myself seem very humble, but in reality, internally, I'm more prideful. And unfortunately, that doesn't give for as fun of stories as the external pride. But today we are looking at pride, as Dave mentioned, and we've been looking at anger and worry. And in some ways, pride is actually a bit harder to identify. If you're angry, you can normally see that you're angry. You can feel yourself getting angry. When you worry, you also feel yourself getting worried. But sometimes it can be a little bit harder to identify pride. It hides itself in our attitudes, and that can make it more dangerous because we can't always see it right away. So this morning, we're going to actually look at a story that Jesus told about pride. And in this story, the word pride actually isn't mentioned. We can just see it in what Jesus is saying. So if you have your outline, I'll invite you to pull that out, and we're going to actually read this together. It will also pop up on the screen here, too. And I want us all to read this together, all right? So I'll give you a second to pull that out, and then we'll dive in. Okay? So to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So like I said, in this passage, the word pride is actually never used, but we can see it as an underlying issue. And so I think there are three statements that we can make to help us navigate and understand pride from this story. So the first, we're going to look at pride and God, how pride affects our relationship with God. And that's really an understanding that, or a way of thinking that our good actions make us good enough, that my good actions make me good enough. And this is really what we see played out in the Pharisees' prayer. Because of his actions, his choices, and his morality, he was good enough. The way the Pharisee shows this is quite extreme, but we've all had thoughts similar at one point or another. We begin to think, how great am I? Look at all the great things I do. I do this. I follow God's commandments by doing this, and this. I serve here. How great of a follower am I? Look at all the faith I have. And look at how little they are doing in comparison. They must not love God as much as I do. I must be the better follower. And all of a sudden, our understanding of salvation has shifted into something that isn't necessarily biblical. In Tim Keller's book, Galatians for You, he actually writes of 3 ways that people can misinterpret God's saving grace. And I think that at times we can each find ourselves in at least one of these camps, maybe more. So the first is very much like the Pharisee. It's the idea that my works, what the good things I do, I serve, I pray, I read the Bible, I tithe, and that's what's saving me. That's how I'm earning my salvation. And then the second camp is more like, I don't do that. I don't necessarily read my Bible. I don't really pray. I don't really serve. But I'm a good person. That's good enough. That will save me. And then the third camp, their idea is that it's my effort of surrender. I made the choice to follow God. I have a strong belief, and that's what's going to save me. Now, the issue with each of these views of salvation is it's the thinking that we somehow did something to save ourselves. And this can lead to us to having a self-congratulatory attitude. And that will hurt our relationship with God. Having the idea that we somehow save ourselves by what we do completely diminishes the amazing thing that God did, or what Jesus did when he died on the cross to save us. You see, each of those 3 views of salvation prompt an idea of salvation of rescue plus. We were rescued when Jesus died on the cross, plus we have to do these other things. When in reality, when Jesus died on the cross, it was complete rescue. There's nothing we can do to save ourselves on our own, and therefore we should not be prideful. In Romans 4:2, Paul writes, if his good deeds had made him acceptable to God, he would have had something to boast about, but that was not God's way. And in Ephesians 2:8-9, again he writes, God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. Paul clearly spells it out for us. God saved us. It's not what we have done. When we think that we have saved ourselves, we are not acknowledging how truly broken and sinful we are. So that's how pride affects our relationship with God. But now I want to look at how pride can also affect our relationship with others. How it often leads us to look down on others because of their poor choices. How I look down on others because of their poor choices. And I really think these 2 ideas go hand in hand with one another. Because if we think that it's our actions or our choices that are making us right with God, or that are saving us, then it's easy to look down on others because they're making poor choices. But when we have this attitude, we're completely forgetting that we also make wrong choices. So throughout this sermon series, we've really been able to acknowledge that we all worry, that we are all angry, and hopefully today you'll realize that we're all prideful. Maybe some of us have also been impatient, or greedy, or jealous. And we've all acted out of these bad emotions as well. We've all made choices out of anger. We've all made choices out of jealousy or pridefulness or worry. And when we mess up, we look to others to give us grace and mercy and forgiveness. And that's the same thing that the other people are looking for when they mess up too. But the issue is that if we're prideful, if we're looking down on people when they make poor choices, we can't extend mercy to them because we're too caught up in our own pride. When we look at the Pharisee, he saw how broken the tax collector was, but he just looked down on him and thanks God that he wasn't like him. When we have an attitude like that of the Pharisee, where we begin to think that our sin is less harmful than others, we begin to think that we are better because we are not like the murderers or adulterers. But like I said, we've made poor choices too, and we're okay with being angry or greedy because it's not as bad as those other things. But when we look in Matthew 5:21-22, Jesus says, "You have heard that our ancestors were told, 'You must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment.' But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell." So what Jesus is communicating here is that at the root of both murder and anger, it's the same issue. Obviously, murder has some grander consequences, but when Jesus is looking at our heart, he's saying that murder and anger have the same root issue. And yet we still think that because we're just angry, we're somehow better, that our hearts are better. So I've talked a bit about how pride impacts our relationships with God and others. And these are both symptoms of pride. But today I want to end with a little bit of an antidote, or a spiritual flu shot against pride. And that is simply what the tax collector's prayer was. "Oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner." And this is such a powerful prayer because it's recognizing that we are broken and that we are sinners. When Alex, Layton, and I were preparing our messages with Dave and Brent, we talked a lot about how pride blinds us. But I just want to tweak that a little bit, because I think pride actually gives us blind spots. When we're prideful, we can clearly see the brokenness and sinfulness of those around us, but we can't always see our own brokenness and sinfulness. The Pharisee saw how broken and sinful that tax collector was, but he couldn't see his own sin. The hardest part about blind spots is that when someone calls us out on it, when someone tries to help us out and show us where our weaknesses are, we don't always believe them because we can't see it. We go to a place of, well, they must be wrong. There must be something wrong with them because I'm perfect, and that's not true. But we can, if someone had gone to the Pharisee and told him he was being prideful, he probably wouldn't have been able to see it, and he probably would have tried to justify everything he had just said in his prayer. But he could still clearly see the brokenness of others. But when we pray the simple prayer of, "Oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner," we become more aware of our blind spots, as we recognize that we are not perfect and that it is only God's mercy that will save us. When Jesus tells this story, he is showing that it is only through God's mercy that we can be saved. Jesus is laying the groundwork for the work that he'll later do on the cross. The basis of the story is that we need mercy. We all need mercy. And the moment we realize that we need mercy, we can no longer be prideful. I love the quote that's at the bottom of your outline, that humility is not thinking of yourself less, or thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's not just about recognizing how broken we are. It's about also recognizing how merciful and loving God is and the great work that Jesus did to save us from our sin. So today, I want to encourage you to make the tax collector's prayer your prayer. It's a short prayer, but it's maybe the most honest prayer we ever pray. And I believe that if we begin to make this prayer like a spiritual discipline where we're saying it every day, we'll become more and more aware of our blind spots. So today, before I end, I just want us to take a few moments to reflect on this prayer. And then I'll close us in prayer. So just take a few moments, bow your head, close your eyes, whatever you want to do, and just reflect on that prayer of, "Oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner." O God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Today I pray that you would work in our hearts. Show us where we are struggle. Show us where we are prideful and where we look down on others. Lord, reveal to us the things that we need to work on, and help us to see that it is only through your grace and your mercy that we can be saved. O God, have mercy on me, a sinner.